Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan. Today, I'm interviewing Josh Dorfman. He's the CEO of a media company called Supercool. Its focus is on solving climate change. He's got a podcast. He's interviewed lots of interesting guests. We'll talk about that. He also co-founded a company that manufactures carbon negative building materials. Happy to have Josh on the podcast today. Hey, Josh, welcome to the podcast. Very nice to meet you.
Well, thank you, Ted. It is a pleasure to be here.
Well, great. Where are you sitting as we speak? Are you in North Carolina?
I am currently in Surfside Beach, South Carolina.
All right. How's the weather there today? It's got spring day going on?
It's balmy. It's a little overcast, but it has that tropical feel today.
Yes. Yeah.
So I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I've already introduced you as the CEO of Supercool. What is the focus today or this week?
The focus this week is on something that we just keep coming back to. And it's really, in many respects, it's about energy efficiency becoming suddenly super sexy. This old, boring thing that we've known about for years is suddenly so fascinating. So we often talk with fast-growing startups, but we actually talked this week. So I've been focused on Johnson Controls, a global HVAC company, 140 years old. It's now stepping into the 21st century in a very big way, using generative AI, developing some really cool solutions to like power stadiums and hospitals. And they did the World Cup, like all 8 stadiums, really controlling like all the HVAC in the various places where soccer was underway. It's kind of fascinating to me.
Oh, that's really great. Yeah, we interact with Johnson Controls because we're building microgrids, and they've got some really nice switch gear. You can pre-program different settings to go to critical loads in your buildings. But I like what you're saying. My passion was energy efficiency. I worked at Rocky Mountain Institute years ago. I was the first director, and we were always promoting energy efficiency, and it was pretty darn boring. I mean, even with the new technologies, and it's a little bit boring. And now I've been in the solar space primarily, and it's much sexier, I guess. But I'm glad that you're there. I mean, energy efficiency is always the cheapest resource, right?
Absolutely. And I have shared kind of your view, just having looked at sustainability and various tech solutions and just solutions in general for years. But suddenly, man, it's like this energy efficiency thing. When you think about buildings, as of course you know, and globally, 30 to 40% of all energy is being consumed in our buildings. And suddenly you have like ways to use particle clouds to clog leaks inside air ducts, which are extremely leaky and cause a lot of energy waste, right? With this company AeroSeal. And it's just like one after the next. I'm like, whoa, it's wild how this is really getting an upgrade for the 21st century.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, let's back way up. All my listeners, and I'm sure your listeners are the same, they like to know something about this guy. Where did he come from? Where were you born and raised, Josh?
Born and raised in Westchester County, New York, about 45 minutes out of New York City, a little town called Armonk.
I know Armonk. I'm a New Yorker as well, so how great. And I know you went to UPenn and studied, what was it, international relations? Do I have that right?
Correct. That's correct.
Then did you immediately go off to ASU and do your graduate program, your MBA, or was there a gap there?
No, I was a little bit unusual coming out of Penn. I had a 3-year plan, which made a lot of sense to me, not really to anyone else in my life, but my 3-year plan was to be a ski bum in Colorado for a year and then go spend 2 years in China. Which I did.
Great. And where were you in Colorado?
So I was in Vail and living in the owner's closet of a condo with 5 of my very good friends, skiing as much as possible, working in an art gallery at nights, waiting tables on the weekends, just creating like this ideal ski bum existence for a year.
Oh, great. Well, I was doing the Aspen thing, so we were not far apart as the crow flies there, and not far apart in terms of our attitudes, that's for sure. China, I was interested that you have a language proficiency in Chinese. Is that Mandarin or is that Cantonese?
Mandarin, yeah.
And then French also.
Yeah, when one of the big influences on my life growing up was my mom, who had also lived in France, was very interested in and was actually working for the State Department after college internship, not quite yet in the Foreign Service, but made some decisions to curtail that, come back to the States, raise a family. So she was a wonderful mom, and she was of course, a huge influence. And one of those influences was to really push me to go explore the world,
Yeah.
kind of follow in her footsteps. And I've always loved it. And so, yeah, it really fit.
So off to China for a couple of years after the Vail experience. And
Yeah.
then was it grad school, or were there other stops along the way? This
Well,
progression?
I mean, okay, so I went to Nanjing, 1995, was
Yeah.
teaching English on a university. And again, thinking about a career, State Department, I just figured if I got to China, for whatever reason, it was really clear to me that the most important relationship in the 21st century would be China and the US, how that gets managed. And we're seeing that manifest every day now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do anything I could just to learn the culture, be immersed. So I was teaching, and then I got a part-time job working in a factory that was making kryptonite bike locks. I don't know if you ever had one of these old U-shaped locks. So I was in the original, one of the original factories in China, and ended up going to work for Kryptonite full-time. I was our first employee on mainland China. We opened more factories, and a couple of years into that experience, it just started occurring to me, here's 1 billion people riding bicycles. This is the biggest bicycle market in the world, therefore the biggest bicycle lock market in the world. But everybody wanted cars, right? You could see the highways and bridges and tunnels coming in. And I just thought, man, I don't know anything about climate change. I wasn't raised as an environmentalist, but how are we going to deal with 1 billion more cars in China and then Eastern Europe and India and all these other developing parts of the world? And that kind of shifted my whole life, my career trajectory, really everything.
Oh, great. And then this Thunderbird School of Global Management at ASU?
Yeah.
Got your MBA there?
I did. So Thunderbird for many years was an independent, just graduate school institution. Started on an Air Force base called Thunderbird right after World War II by an admiral who felt, well, if we have the Marshall Plan in Europe and we're going to go rebuild Japan and we're going to go engage in a post-World War II global economy, we need executives who can navigate in those waters. So cultural skills, language, business. So I found my way to Thunderbird post-China. I've recently, over the last few years, Thunderbird was kind of merged into Arizona State, which is a really good fit for it. Just more resources, more kind of even more global exposure. It was amazing, man. I mean, we were in like Glendale, Arizona, where they usually play like some Super Bowl or something. Like, so there's a stadium there, like every fast food franchise you can possibly imagine. And then there was this campus that was probably the most, aside from the United Nations, it was like a mini UN. You had kids coming from all over the world to study business. It was quite a trip. It was awesome.
How great. Now, I want to ask you about the Lazy Environmentalist, because you certainly don't seem like a lazy guy at all to me. Clearly an environmentalist, but was that talk about that? I mean, that you did that for 15 years, I think I've read.
It went on for a while. It got its start. So in 2004, having now several years later come back from China, trying to process everything that I felt like I'd seen about the future and these challenges we'd have around the environment, I decided to start my first company, which was called Vivavi, like Viva V, Live Life, this modern design, sustainable home furniture and furnishings company. So my thought was, can I help we live in a consumer society, consumer economy. Can I help consumers shift their consumption in a more sustainable direction? And I felt that leaning into modern design and aesthetics would be a great way to make the kind of the medicine go down, so to speak. Make it really easy for people to be like, oh yeah, I love this stuff. This table's it's beautiful. Has to be made from FSC certified wood or reclaimed material or whatever. But like that was my view. And so I'd started this company in Washington, D.C. I'd actually quit a PhD program in political science at GW, where I was looking at China, environment, and politics. I started this company. I had one employee at the time, and on her last day working for me, because I was moving the company to Brooklyn to go get around all these amazing designers, she took that opportunity to effectively call me out for being, in her mind, a terrible environmentalist. here you are, Josh, you're selling all this green stuff, but you're always in the shower. You barely recycle. You're going to throw your bed out. I took it to the homeless shelter. Like, you don't act like an environment, right? Like, you're pretty much the worst human I know. And like, you're a giant hypocrite. And I had seen Michael Crook, who at the time was the CEO of Patagonia, give a speech really talking about, like, look, if you're a values-driven company, then you owe it to all your stakeholders, especially your customers, to be extremely authentic and transparent. Celebrate what you do well, own what's not so great as well, and you got to let the people know. And so I wrote a blog called The Lazy Environmentalist about myself. And I was like, look, I take long showers. I do my best thing in the shower. I'd love a great low flow shower head. I want an Audi TT convertible. Don't really care if it's biodiesel or electric. If I can afford it and it's what I want, I'll get it. I care, but I'm lazy. And I think there's probably millions of Americans who feel like I do. If it were easy, we'd all go green. We're lazy environmentalists.
Oh, that's great. And then I saw somewhere, and I was doing a little background on you, this notion of stylish and green living. So that was the Vivavi. That was really the focus, right? Make it quite stylish. Make it like Tesla Motors has really done, is make a pretty classy vehicle that everybody really wants. Wanted. Yes. Well, that is an interesting moment in time we find ourselves to talk about that. But that is the idea, and it's you see it in architecture. You see it. You certainly see it in fashion increasingly. But 20 years ago, that was a bit of a novel idea. And so I wrote this little blog. A radio producer called me up early 2005 and said, hey, I read your blog. And I was like, oh, you did what? How did you find my blog? He said, well, let's turn this into a radio show. And I said, great, let's do that. I don't really have a big marketing budget. Let's go for it. So I was doing this little internet radio show, but I was in Brooklyn. I got introduced to folks at Sirius XM. I tested. They liked the show. They picked it up and eventually became a reality TV show on Sundance Channel and kind of a whole manifestation of different media I was doing. But it was right place, right time. Al Gore's movie An Inconvenient Truth had come out in 2006. I'm sure you remember the moment the media started casting around and saying, hey, we want to go tell this green story, but how are we going to do this? What do we know? Well, let's go look for products. Let's go look for ways to make this relevant to consumers. And I was talking to, that was my radio show. That was my business. And so, it was the right place. It was a good conversation, and it was a great ride. Oh, great. And you had a daily radio show.
Yeah. So that was, it was really fun. And I tell you, the moments that made it, that really crystallized kind of this concept for me. And Supercool is really an extension, I would say, of Lazy Environmentalist, just more of a business to business conversation. But I wanted to do a show, it was must have been 2006, on eco-friendly transportation. And so, we got someone on from Toyota. That was kind of interesting. The Prius, whatever. And then we found this guy. He was a drag car racer out in Portland, and he had taken all these batteries. He worked in a warehouse, and he took all these batteries out of a forklift, and he shoved them in the back of a 1972 tiny little Datsun that he called the White Zombie. And he could get that thing going to like 0 to 60 and something obscene. And so we found him and we got him on the show. And he's like, Josh, you wouldn't believe it. I was at the track the other night. We blew the doors off this Corvette. And I went up to the driver after. And I was like, how do you feel about the fact that I just kicked your butt using a car running on American-made energy, 800 pounds of torque, like going on and on. And we had this tiny little show. It was live. And so people are listening in their cars or their trucks. It was like one of the only times our lines blew up, with all these, guys in their 18-wheelers going, man, how'd you get that? I want that too. And I thought, this is fascinating. Here's all these people who I would guess don't identify as environmentalists, who are thrilled about the environmental solution. And that was really eye-opening for me.
How great. How great. Well, let's talk about Planted and how that came about. Because I understand, that's a company that's building carbon negative building materials, which is incredibly admirable. How did that come about?
So in 2018, I was living in Western North Carolina in Asheville with my family. We'd been there for a few years. And I got to thinking, you know what? I'm in the right place to go build a new furniture company. I'm actually in the furniture capital of the world, right? Historically. Yeah. And so we put together a little manufacturing business. It was kind of direct to consumer. I found the best designer, went back to the best designer from years before who I'd worked with and said, hey, let's go do this. Let's go do this again. I think we can do it smarter. And so we built this little business called Simbly, like simple assembly, sort of mushed together. And it was going well. Pandemic hit. That started to really slow us down. We couldn't make new product. We couldn't manufacture. And materials cost, when I couldn't get material when I could, the prices were just going through the roof. And I started thinking a lot about material. And could we come up with something to make furniture out of that was better than trees, that was more environmentally responsible than trees? Do we really need to cut down trees? Could we find something that could grow faster, potentially, just be better really better for the planet? And in that moment where I was thinking about it, not acting on it, I was introduced to a guy also in North Carolina who had a little manufacturing company. Someone put us together, and I'm talking about materials and all the stuff that's annoying me. And he's like, oh, well, I have 6 giant trash bags of industrial hemp in my garage. And I was like, you have what? And he's like, yeah, no, I've been kind of experimenting with this too. And I was like, well, hold on. Like, who are you? Like, what? And he's like, well, we just moved here. I just spent 8 years at SpaceX. I was designing the life support systems to keep astronauts alive on the Dragon Crew spacecraft. And we left, and we just, I put together a spreadsheet of the best places in America to live. Raleigh got to the top. We moved here. We liked it. In a very engineering way, here we are. So Wada and I started working together, and then we brought in another SpaceXer that Wada had worked with, Nathan. He became the three of us became the co-founders of the business, and we just instantly clicked, got to work, and said, you know what? Let's go see if we can find something that goes faster than trees. Mm-hmm. Hemp was the starting point.
Yep.
It took a bit, but we moved beyond hemp because we just realized if we're going to replace trees, you're talking about lumber. Where does lumber go? Lumber goes into homes primarily, and our thought was, okay, well, we got a SpaceX team. We're definitely going to build some kind of better factory. So what's made in a factory out of wood for homes? And so when we started talking to home builders, say, well, there was plywood, but now here comes oriented strand board. That's replaced plywood as the structural material for walls and for roofs and for floors. And so he said, okay, we're going to make oriented strand board. What's wrong with it? And then builders would say, well, if it gets wet, you got a big problem. We say, got it. Okay, we got a problem to solve. Let's go find something that's more moisture resistant. Let's do it at the same price. Let's go figure out a better mousetrap. And so eventually we found this grass. Working with the Department of Agriculture in North Carolina, we found this very fast-growing grass that they were looking at as a potential source for biofuels, right? So that became our source of biomass. And then we've just built the first all-electric production line for these structural building materials. So no smokestack on our warehouse. In fact, we can put this production line in almost any warehouse in America.
That's really great. I saw a picture of it, and I was curious, but the what I always called particle board, you're really replacing, you called it oriented strand board, I think. I thought another issue is the glue that goes into it. How does your grass, I think you have a big machine that's compressing it, but how does it stick together?
We do use an adhesive. That's really not the secret sauce. We use basically a very high grade adhesive that the industry has moved to, so that when it comes to us, all the formaldehyde has been reacted out of it. But it's a very low percentage of the product. On the order of somewhere between we have a particular formula, but on the order of 3 to 6%. It perhaps is resin, but you're talking about a 50-pound board. You're talking about mostly it's this grass, and the way that we get to like great strength, and we're able to build something structural is we can slice this grass incredibly thin. We've built all these machines to do that, and so when you're pressing, like imagine bamboo, if you were able to slice bamboo extremely thin, press 15, 20, 25 layers of that together versus like a chipboard, like you said, or a particle board, or oriented strand board, which is what builders use. You're talking about maybe 3 to 4 layers of wood that's getting pressed. So you're just able to condense a lot more fiber in the process we've developed, and you get to a really great product.
And so at this point, you're cranking out, or the company is cranking out, 4x8 sheets of this stuff?
So it's 4x8 sheets, yeah. And we, again, right place, right time with the right solution. So we started this business 4 years ago. We raised $2 million in the first year, kind of by the end of 2021. And coming out of that seed round, we started talking with D.R. Horton, the largest home builder in the country. They were interested in what we were doing. And we've built, a wonderful relationship with them. That just this past fall, they gave us an order for 10 million panels. 10 million panels is about 90,000 homes. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful trajectory for that business.
And each home that uses your product saves about 17 trees, and 17 trees would have been cut down to make that home, but in your case, you're saving that.
Well, the idea is, again, it depends on the size of the home, right? How much of this material will go into it. But yeah, roughly speaking, that is the idea. It's really to replace trees. And the reason why we say carbon negative is because if you're able to grow something, so in this case, very efficiently, let's say, 9-10 times faster than trees, then you're pulling carbon, very efficient with this renewable. It's growing every year. You bring it to your factory in a very efficient way, so you're not giving back emissions in transportation, or you're optimizing every aspect of this business. But really, when you have an electric production line, no smokestack, you're not giving the carbon back in the production process, right? So you pull the carbon out, and you're really able to sequester more of that carbon, in that finished product that's going into a home. So it is sometimes hard for folks to get their head wrapped around, but really, in this sense, it's like, the more you build, the more you're locking away carbon, the more you're moving toward an abundant future. That's that's how we see the world.
And so your product is the sheathing that would be put up all around the house before whatever stucco or whatever shingles or whatever would go on, and also the roof decking, right?
Correct.
Question now: what's the marginal cost compared to what the builders have been using before?
Well, again, that's always a moving target, because you're now in a moment where we're seeing tariffs go in on Canada, so you have less material that's able to come in from the north. The target for the company is to be at as close to price parity as the market demands as soon as possible, and so we're on that trajectory, and feeling very good about where we are at the moment, and the reception from the market has been really, right. Really nice.
So, but I take it that pre-tariff, that there is a marginal cost. It costs a little bit more to make this product, right?
Well, I mean, the only thing that I would say is we're a young company, and so right. So
as you scale
of course,
up,
we anticipate getting there very quickly.
And I wonder if you could be selling carbon credits.
It's something that we've certainly looked at. Mm-hmm. Those markets to date are still, particularly for these industries, in their immature a little bit, just not fully clear what that might mean for the business right now in terms of pricing. Right. And so but the intent was, when we started the business, to build a business that could stand on its own. If we had carbon credits, that could be accretive to what we're doing, but we wouldn't go build a business that we're going to rely on carbon credits to be viable.
That makes sense. And then, do you have your sights on, or does that company have its sights on building dimensional or manufacturing dimensional lumber as well as the sheets of plywood or the sheathing?
Yeah, I mean, the exciting thing about the technology is, as you mentioned in your comments, Ted, is that this is it's a press, right? So we've built this machine that's able to continuously press wood, and now we're getting to a dimension, roughly call it half an inch-ish, where you can go build a panel. Yep. But you can tune the machine to press it at different dimensions, and so there is for sure a vision of getting into many more of the products that we use to build our homes in our built environment.
2x4s, 2x6s, 2x10s, 2x12s, potentially?
All of that could potentially be on the roadmap.
Oh, how fantastic. Huh. Well, now you left that company a couple years back, I think, right?
So I rolled out as CEO about just a little over a year ago.
Mm-hmm. And what have you been up to since then?
Well, it was really fascinating. I mean, Planted got me laser focused on home building, on the built world, and looking at, of course, what we're doing, what our potential competitors are doing, and what was happening that was really innovative in that market.
Mm-hmm.
When I stepped back and kind of looked broader and say, okay, well, what else is happening in the world? What really struck me was that there's so much innovation underway from a climate perspective across industries. And it really struck me that there were three things driving that trend. One is you've had all these climate technologies that have had a decade of large backing, investment, time to kind of go from pilot stage to commercial stage to scale. They're actually out in the world delivering results today. You have hundreds of cities across the US and around the world that had put in place climate action plans to turn their cities really into living laboratories for climate action and seeing some really cool policies and some interesting change. And then you had the tailwinds of the IRA and other large pools of capital. And all this was coming together where we started saying, oh my gosh, there's so much happening that's not being told the way that certainly I think it needs to be told, if it's being told at all. And so we felt like that we're in this new era of climate progress, this climate transition to clean energy that's underway, underreported. Let's go tell those stories. Let's go wrap a new media company around that.
Right, and that's what Supercool is doing, right? You're championing these success stories. It sounds like.
Yeah, Supercool. We are championing these success stories for a number of reasons. What we're trying to get at is to understand, take a city like New Orleans. So this isn't necessarily technology, but New Orleans figured out a way to build bike lanes 3 times faster than their peer cities and 3 times faster than they were doing. And as did Providence, and as did Pittsburgh, and as did Austin, and as did Denver. And so I came across this and I thought, well, how? Like, everybody wants bike lanes. What's the playbook, right? Like, yeah. So the innovation isn't always about technology. And so we got this guy on the show, Kyle Wagenschutz. He's at his organization's called City Thread. And he had worked on this pilot program to understand, like, hey, every city wants this infrastructure, safe, connected bike lanes. It takes decades to get them built. Can we figure out how to do it in months instead? What would we need to do? And he had spent years cutting his teeth in Memphis, which was, when he got there, the worst place to bike, according to Bicycling Magazine. He got it in 2 years running. The mayor came in, got him off the list, said to Kyle, get us off the list. He did. And so I thought that would be cool to understand. What's the playbook here? How do you do that? What can we learn from this?
Can that be explained in a couple sentences? What is the secret sauce to getting bike lanes put in place quickly?
So there's so much behind it, but one of the things that jumped out that really struck me, right, was one of the things Kyle said. He's like, look, like, what you need to do is you need to clear the runway. You need to just make it so that bike lanes can go in when budget's allocated. Everybody wants it. And so he said, what you don't do is you don't go talk to bicyclists because they're already on board. You need to go talk to car drivers who are never going to ride a bike and get them to support the bike lanes. And so it's sort of like counterintuitive, but once he says it, you're like, okay, well, that makes sense. How do you do that? He said, well, we tested a bunch of things, but what really struck was this idea of, could we appeal to nostalgia? Remember when you were growing up, the streets were a little slower. You were outside a little more. Kids could play. You knew your neighbors. And they put these campaigns together that started to bring more people on board and into the fold. So they're not showing up at City Hall during meetings and yelling at the city councilors for what's going on. They're actually supportive of the change that they're seeing in their neighborhoods. There's a bunch of things like that where I thought it's really interesting. That
is, and I must say, I live in Glendale, California, and we had the city put in a really great new bike lane on one of the busiest boulevards, and took away a couple lanes of traffic, and there was this enormous hue and cry about it. So much so that they've had to rip out the bike lanes altogether, and it cost a lot of money, and it was sort of an embarrassment to the city, but actually I gave them credit for trying something and then also realizing that it didn't work. But like you said, figuring out how to appeal to those that would be classically opposed, or certainly wouldn't be the users or the beneficiaries of the bike lane, that sounds really good. You must be, you're really focused on climate solutions. It sounds like you're all over the place with your energy and your enthusiasm. You're an optimist, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in my view, there's so much underway today to latch onto to say that this change is really happening in a concerted, concrete way. And one of the things that I wrote about recently, just based on the guests we were bringing on the show, was that so many people will say, they'll throw their hands up in the air and they'll be like, oh, it's the next generations will figure it out. It's like they'll come up with the solutions. And I look at who's actually coming up with solutions, and so many of it happens to be many of the best CEOs, entrepreneurs are in their 50s or beyond, who are building remarkable companies. And I just see it over and over again.
I completely share your optimism. It's just unbelievable, the pace of change and the breadth of solutions that are out there. What have we not talked about that you really would like to point out? Anything?
Well, again, this is the moment that we find ourselves in, where there's so much to be hopeful about it. And I do think, I certainly would never want to come across as Pollyanna. Of course, we're talking about the biggest, if we're talking about climate change, this is the greatest challenge our civilization faces, right? Yep. But in our daily lives, to have agency, to actually take action, if you focus solely on the problem, it then becomes harder to act, but you're going to miss this whole other side of the story that's wonderful and uplifting and creates opportunities to build wonderful businesses, to affect change, to build stronger, more vibrant communities. And so, that's what keeps us going. That's what we're going to continue to do, the kinds of stories that we're going to lean into. And it's a lot of fun.
Thanks so much. Well put.
Thank you, Ted.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's Ecologic. We'll see you next time.